My sister uttered these cruel words about our elderly mother. Old people without money are just in the way. How could she say such cold things to her own mother? Anger trembled through me. I wasn't interested in Dad's inheritance or anything like that, so I could bear it, but it still upset me deeply. Then, shockingly, my sister and her husband kicked our mother out of the house. I glared at them, but they only smiled smugly, impervious to my protests. As I struggled with what to do next, Mom quietly said, "It's all right," and left the room. Bewildered, I followed her. After walking a distance from the house, she stopped, chuckled, and cheerfully remarked, "Those two are done for now." Perplexed, I asked, "What do you mean?" "My name is Kate. I'm 52 years old. I have never married, but I have no regrets about that. I've worked full-time at a local company, ensuring a stable life for my old age. My mother, Tiffany, is 79 years old. She and my father were known as a loving couple in our neighborhood until he passed away at 89. After his death, my sister Sarah became fixated on his inheritance. Sarah has a grown son who's known for causing trouble, and her husband is quite a character. Money-hungry and pretentious, always preaching that material possessions define one's worth. Their reckless spending habits constantly leave them short on cash, a troublesome pair indeed. Sarah has always been greedy and showy. I recall how, in high school, she would pester our mother for the latest fads. When Mom refused, Sarah resorted to stealing money from her purse. At first, Mom couldn't believe it. She noticed funds disappearing without her knowledge and decided to set a trap, leaving her wallet on the desk and observing from a hidden spot. As expected, Sarah took the money. Mom confronted her immediately, but Sarah shamelessly shouted, "It wasn't me. This is the first time. It's always Kate who does it." Furious, Mom scolded her but seemed relieved that Sarah hadn't stolen from someone else. My sister's husband shared the same mentality, maintaining appearances while their finances dwindled. They seemed eager to shower their son with money. It came to light that my sister and her husband repeatedly approached our parents, asking for financial support. They pressured them, saying, "We want to give our son a proper education. These days, tutoring is essential. Consider it an investment. Can't you spare $50 a month? If you don't help, don't expect us to care for you in your old age. Think of it as securing your future. Give our eldest son more now, and you won't have to worry about your later years." Our parents never intended to depend on anyone for their care, but they fretted about my future. "We're fine, but what about Kate?" My sister and her husband's eyes gleamed as if they found their prey. "Exactly, we can frame it as for Kate. Our eldest son will look after Kate in her old age. If you view it as an investment in our son, surely $50 or $90 isn't too much." Using the guise of care as a shield, they managed to extract a significant sum from our parents. So they continued to deplete our parents' finances. Mom and Dad lived frugally on their pensions, making their lives undoubtedly challenging. Then, their grandson secured a job and moved out of state. I feared he might never return, leaving our parents' financial support in vain. Discussions about tuition ceased, replaced by requests for money to cover their own living expenses. Our son has grown up and moved away, but his education drained us financially. "Can't you continue helping us? The usual $90 will suffice. Kate is unmarried and unreliable. It's always better to have a man around." "Don't worry, Dad. If anything happens, we'll be there in a heartbeat." Our parents realized they were being financially drained, but they felt powerless against my sister and her husband's persuasive arguments. They were skilled at painting their requests as investments for emergencies, even pledging to look after me. Then our father passed away. It might have been the stress. He had become a mere shadow of his former self, his health visibly deteriorating. When my sister and her husband notified us of Dad's death, her first question was, "What about the inheritance?" It was sadly characteristic of my sister to prioritize that over everything else. Inheritance. "Dad just passed away. This isn't the time for that." I tried to interject, but my sister cut me off. "I'll be there soon." "Mom's already there, isn't she?" I was horrified by my sister and her husband. Money seemed to be their sole concern. Even before the funeral ended, she began probing about the inheritance. Turning to Mom, she remarked, "Mom, you're not going to take everything in the inheritance, are you? You'll need care soon. Care requires money and strength, and you know a woman's strength alone isn't enough for that, right?" I struggled to grasp her words. Consider this. Would any mother-in-law feel comfortable revealing her vulnerabilities to a son-in-law she hardly knows? It felt like my sister was simply trying to pressure Mom, intimidate her, and lay claim to the inheritance. And what about Kate? What will become of her if she's left alone? Don't sisters need to support each other sometimes, Mom? You wouldn't want Kate to face a solitary life, would you? How could someone be so consumed by greed? I struggled to even consider her my sister anymore. I anxiously awaited Mom's response to her audacious demand for the inheritance. Mom calmly replied, "All right, I understand. I may need your husband's support in the future, so I'll waive my claim to Dad's inheritance. Is that acceptable?" But it wasn't. I attempted to intervene. "Mom, can we really trust her to honor her word?" Mom motioned for me to remain silent and then turned to me, saying, "Listen to Sarah. You should relinquish the inheritance as well." "All right," Mom insisted firmly, leaving me no choice but to agree. The process of renunciation turned out to be more complex than anticipated, taking several days to complete. Throughout, my sister persistently called, demanding updates. "How's the renunciation going? Hurry up. Is Mom finished yet? Let me know when it's done." Despite my sister's relentless pressure driven by greed, I remained committed to honoring Mom's wishes and continued with the process. Once the renunciation was finalized, we invited my sister and her husband over. Mom announced that we had both relinquished our claims. My sister and her husband exchanged triumphant glances. Gazing at our elderly mother, my sister remarked with a cold smirk, "Old people without money are just a burden." I was stunned, struggling to grasp her words. "What? What did you say?" I demanded, hoping I had misheard. My sister chuckled callously. "I said old people without money are just a burden. You're useless now, Mom. Get it? This house belongs to us now. It's mine, and there's someone here who isn't welcome to stay." How could anyone say such cruel things to their own mother? It's unbelievable, right? Mom's continued presence in our house now seemed odd to my sister. "If you want to stay, you'll need to pay rent and cover living expenses. Is that acceptable?" Of course, it wasn't acceptable. This house held deep sentimental value for Mom, and she couldn't simply leave at their command. Yet after announcing the renunciation of the inheritance, they were already trying to evict the rightful occupants. It was unforgivable, even though we had signed away everything. Mom trembled as she replied, "It's all right, I'll leave. Everything in this house belongs to you now. Do as you wish with it all. I'll take only this small bag. I won't be returning to this house. Goodbye." My sister and her husband smirked maliciously. Fuming with anger, I accompanied Mom as she left. I felt somewhat bewildered as we departed. Even as we walked away, my sister and her husband made no attempt to follow. When we had put enough distance between us and the house, Mom suddenly stopped and burst into triumphant laughter. Why was she laughing? Had she lost her mind? It wasn't surprising, considering she had been manipulated by her own daughter and had now lost her home. Then Mom uttered, "Those two are done for now," with an almost cheerful tone. Confused, I could only manage to ask, "What do you mean?" "I moved out when I started working. By the time I turned 35, I had purchased the condominium. I never thought I'd marry. Where else would Mom go? I couldn't leave her alone, so I brought her to live with me." She repeatedly said, "Thank you. I'm sorry," not out of sorrow, but from a sense of guilt towards me. I knew she must have been deeply hurt. I resolved to live happily with her from then on. Once settled in the condo, Mom began to open up. I wonder why sisters can turn out so differently. I always knew she was greedy, but to this extent. How much money will ever satisfy her? I've contributed approximately $110,000 each year for 15 years towards her son's education. That's a total of $1,650,000. We never really expected any care in return. Was it all for my sake? Mom nodded with a hint of guilt. It seemed she had been contemplating my future, worrying that I might end up alone. I'm certain now that my sister and her husband never had any intention of caring for our parents or me. Despite Mom holding on to hope for Sarah, I doubt they ever had any plans for caregiving. Fortunately, Dad didn't require much care before he passed. It must have suited Sarah well. Mom smiled again, leaving me puzzled about its meaning. Yes, it's clear now. She's content with Dad's inheritance. But she was somewhat naive, I believe. Naive? I inquired. Mom didn't explicitly state it. "You're a kind-hearted child," she murmured softly. Silence settled between us once more. Then she asked, "Did you have expectations regarding the inheritance?" I never relied on it. I didn't care for Dad expecting inheritance. Mom and I were the ones who tended to him, albeit briefly. My sister insisted on male assistance for bathing and toileting, but Mom and I managed his care. I nursed him solely out of gratitude, with no expectation in return. And I planned to do the same for Mom, without my sister's involvement. It was all out of genuine love for them. Mom, why don't you come live here? I've been feeling lonely anyway, I suggested. Mom's eyes welled with tears this time. She thanked me repeatedly before saying something cryptic. Just give it a few months. I can't explain now, but I promise to tell you everything later. You don't need to suffer or be sad anymore. We can undo what's been done. Can you wait until then without asking questions? I was puzzled but sensed Mom had something on her mind, perhaps about my sister or the inheritance. For now, I agreed silently. Mom's face lit up with a youthful smile. I wondered about her mention of a few months, but I knew better than to press if she wasn't ready to share. I made a conscious effort to put my sister out of my mind completely. We decided to try a weekday hula dance class. How does this outfit look for Tuesday? Mom asked, a mix of embarrassment and happiness evident in her expression. I wanted Mom to enjoy as many moments of joy as possible while she still could. Gradually, she began to relax more and smile more often. After a few months had passed, I had nearly forgotten about our waiting period. Mom, however, remembered clearly and seemed cheerful that morning. It's been a few months indeed, and they've changed our lives, she remarked. Is that what you meant? Then Mom revealed something startling. After a certain period, you can no longer renounce your inheritance. Renounce the inheritance. What does that mean? I was taken aback. Mom and I had already relinquished our claim to the property. Why would renunciation come up again? We've already renounced our inheritance, haven't we? This isn't about us. It's about Sarah. I was bewildered. Why would Sarah renounce the inheritance? Mom chuckled triumphantly. Because there was no inheritance, only debts. That couple inherited nothing but debt. What a twist of fate. Dad didn't own any property, just liabilities. Mom and I had renounced any claim, so we escaped the debt. Meanwhile, my sister and her husband inherited not property, but debts. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you more, but I was afraid it would hurt you if you knew the truth. And perhaps you would have told Sarah. I wanted to shoulder the blame alone, so I kept it from you, Mom confessed. I was stunned. Mom had patiently waited for her moment, keeping this revelation to herself. She had anticipated that if I knew about my sister inheriting the debt, I might inadvertently inform her, so she kept it secret. This plan was actually Dad's idea. He gradually transferred his savings into my bank account. He deliberately incurred some debt, but it was strategic, Mom explained. He purchased several plots of land in remote areas, some needing immediate repairs, with the intention for Sarah to inherit it all. Mom revealed they had retained some savings to avoid suspicion from my sister, but ultimately, it resulted in a $200,000 debt. Did you know you can't inherit savings without also inheriting the debt? It's either accept everything or renounce it all. What foolish children, Mom remarked, almost gleeful at Dad's scheme. Witnessing Mom's determination, I understood the depth of her disdain for my sister. Mom, perhaps I would have told Sarah if I had known earlier. But now, considering her predicament, I can't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. I suppose I felt that anger too, I admitted. My sister and her husband were left with a $200,000 debt. Some properties required immediate repairs, adding to their financial burden. The window for renouncing the inheritance had passed, leaving them no option to opt out now. Blinded by the allure of $100,000, they had ended up with a substantial debt. They might soon sell their rural properties, likely fetching far less than what they paid. Their marriage could even suffer due to the financial strain. Eventually, my sister realized the gravity of the situation and called me in panic. Help me, the debt is overwhelming, she pleaded. It's infuriating. Mom, you knew this, didn't you? You're partly to blame. Pay off my debt now. We're family. Her selfishness left me astounded. Inheriting means taking on the debt too. I didn't know that. I only wanted the property, not the debt. You take it, you can have the debt, she yelled angrily with the phone. Her demands were irrational and selfish. She insisted, you should inherit the debt as a family. Cancel the renunciation. Her words were nonsensical and unreasonable. I'm hanging up now. Maybe you should discuss this with your own family, your husband and son, though I can guess what they'll think of you. I ended the call, feeling a sense of clarity and relief for the first time in a while. I had anticipated my sister and her husband might divorce. Indeed, my sister ended up getting divorced, but it was her husband who initiated it. As I suspected, he was driven by greed and likely saw no benefit in remaining married to someone burdened with debt. However, they couldn't divorce immediately with a sudden $200,000 debt hanging over them. They needed to settle everything before proceeding with the divorce. The house they lived in was sold. My sister and her husband, who always relied on our parents' money, never saved anything. Banking on Dad's inheritance, they probably won't be able to clear the debt. What lies ahead for my sister is the daunting task of working diligently to pay it off. She insists she won't divorce, though it seems less about love for her husband and more about not wanting him to escape the debt and leave her alone. It's exactly the kind of mindset my sister would have. It's almost pitiful. Meanwhile, I continue to reside in the condo with Mom. It turns out Mom had transferred money into her own bank account and isn't facing financial struggles. She gives me around $70 each month for expenses. I've tried to decline it numerous times, but Mom insists, vowing to continue until I accept. Reluctantly, I've started accepting the $70. Despite receiving this money, I'm not spending it recklessly. You never know when Mom or I might need it, so I'm saving diligently. The hula dancing we started as a mother-daughter activity turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. Most importantly, seeing Mom laugh and relish herself makes me realize that life isn't so bad after all.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick, is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.